So let's dive in with communication tools and specifically emergency communication tools. So emergencies can vary from hurricanes or natural disasters to a dangerous person or animal being in your community or the water being cut out. The size of the emergency doesn't really matter, because in an emergency situation, one thing is really clear, that the board or manager needs to communicate with all residents in the community, both owners and tenants, in a fast and efficient way. That way, the largest number of people possible can be warned or given instructions on what they need to do. And in Neigbrs by Vinteum, we have two tools that allow you to do that. We have smart calls and text messages. So smart calls are messages that you type out into the system, and they're sent by call to everyone in the community. The text is converted into speech, and then when the resident picks up, they hear an automatic voice, a bit like Alexa or Siri, that gives them the message. And this is a really great way, if in an emergency you need to let everyone know, call them. And you don't have to waste time by calling everyone individually. You can use this to just send out a notification. We also have text messages, so that is pretty self-explanatory. You can type in your message and it sends everyone in the community a text message. This is a little bit slower than a smart book call because people might not see it instantly, but it is still a really great tool. We also have the option to send out program text messages, so they're linked to certain notifications. So in a non-emergency situation, if a resident reserves an amenity, they get a text message reminding them about their reservation so that they don't forget. But both smart calls and text messages allow the board and your manager, if you have one, to react very fast and get information quickly to people. So that way you can have a quick turnaround, everyone can have a quick reaction when needed. So these are the first two tools. Then we'll go into email. So around 90% of Americans use email. So it's a really powerful way to communicate with routine information to your residents. The vast majority of people will have it. And it's also very versatile. So you could have your own email inbox if you're a small community and send out emails that way, or using Neigbrs, you could send emails out to everyone in the community through notices, and you can also filter that. So you can send it just to one street, just to one building, or certain units or homes if you'd like to do that. Then you could also separate them by profile. So you could also just email the board, so just them get an email. The other great thing about email is that whether you use Gmail, Hotmail, or Neigbrs by Vinteum, you can see the amount that was sent and who received them. So in Neigbrs, we have the email log, and you can see who's got the email, and you can see who's opened it as well. So that gives you more insight into what you're sending out and what people are actually receiving, which gives you information as to what communication is working well for you. After email, we have newsletters. So this isn't a groundbreaking communication method. A lot of communities already have newsletters, but they are highly appreciated. They're a really useful way of communication because they're quite different. It gives a sense of community. You can send out a large amount of information in one place. So you could do that by distributing a paper version, or you could distribute a paper version and also save it online in the documents section of Neigbrs or in Google Drive. And you could email it out as well. So send it out to everyone in the community so that they have it offline and online if they would like it. And I think that having a newsletter really shows that sense of community. I think it really shows that the board or the committee that organizes the newsletter is willing to put in that effort. They're being open, and it creates a real sense of togetherness. I mentioned a committee. I think having a committee is a great way to organize the newsletter so that the board isn't too overwhelmed with things to do. You have one specific group that organizes the newsletter and writes it. But if your community is quite small, then the board could put it together as well. But the newsletter does need to be regular. So it could be once every month, once every 3 months, or even a couple of times a year. So long as it is fairly regular, so residents know when to expect it, that's important. But the most important thing about the newsletter is that it has to provide value. If you get a newsletter and it's not interesting, it's not useful, no one's going to read it. So you really need to think about who you're writing for and what they want to know. That means that the information has to be useful to residents. So I would tell them about events that are going to happen, meetings, maintenance that might occur, any information that they need to know about the community you should include, as well as community news. Maybe someone just had a grandchild or a child, or someone has just moved into the community or is moving out. Those things are really good to know, and the newsletter is the best place to put them, as it's the most appropriate place. It's not day-to-day information, but it is something that is really nice to know and gives you that sense of community. Then going into meetings, once again, not groundbreaking. Every HOA, every condo in the US needs to have meetings, but a lot of community associations struggle to reach the quorum for meetings because people think that the meeting isn't interesting or useful, or they don't have time for that. So the board needs to think about how they can turn that opinion around, which isn't a very easy task, but it is something that is important to think about. And use that meeting to provide value to residents. So residents need to have the opportunity to have their say. They should be able to talk, even if it is just for a few minutes. A lot of communities limit that to 3 minutes. That's fine, as long as residents have an opportunity to speak, as well as to find out what the board's doing, what the board's planning. These are really important, and that's what provides value to a meeting. So when you're in a meeting, sticking to the agenda, again, can be quite challenging, but is important so that it sticks to the objectives of the meeting and hopefully follows the time schedule planned, so that way people know that they can arrive and they'll leave on time when the meeting was meant to end. That does make a big difference. Then going into hybrid communication, at the start of the pandemic, everything ground to a halt, right? So you were used to doing things one way, and suddenly absolutely everyone had to change the way that they were working, the way they were communicating, which meant that they switched to online communication. They started doing online meetings. But now I see quite a lot that communities are going back to being in person. And I think that's great. I think in person does bring something special. Feeling that you're all together is really important. And again, I think it comes back to a sense of community. It also can help meetings to be slightly more organized if they're in person. I had an online class the other day and it was very chaotic. Large meetings can be very chaotic online. But hybrid communication is something that's really good to do. I think it's ideal because it's not about creating extra work for the board, having to do something online and offline. It's about reaching the most amount of people. Because if you think about community associations, often you have someone who is older, who prefers in-person communication, meetings, and so on, or they want to read stuff in paper, they want to hold it. But then you have younger people who don't see the value of that. So by doing hybrid communication, you can do a little bit of both. So if you have a meeting coming up, post it on the notice board so people who live in the community and go past the notice board can read it, but also send it out by email, because that way if you have people who don't live in the community all the time, like snowbirds, seasonal residents, or people who don't really check the notice board, they can be aware of what's going on. The same thing with a newsletter. You could ask people, you could do a survey. So in Neigbrs by Vinteum, we have surveys. You could use surveys to see who wants a paper copy and just print it for them, and everyone else can have it online, or print a limited amount, for instance. Then everyone who isn't bothered about paper doesn't need to receive it, because sometimes I get things that are paper and I just throw them away, and it was just a waste of money and time to go and print it and send it to me when I didn't want it. So the idea of hybrid communication really is to open more opportunities for more people to participate, for more people to know what's going on, and especially different channels. So the next slide, Frankie, in different channels. That's really what it's about, reaching more people. Like I said before, different people of different ages have different habits. So someone who's 30 might have the Neighbors by Vinteum app, and they might check what's going on by looking at their notifications, whereas someone of 70 is more interested in checking the notice board and seeing what's going on in a more traditional way. And if you do both, you can reach both people. It makes it easier to find information for residents if you find them rather than them having to find you. And it also gives the board more options of how to send information. So if it's an event, you could post it in the calendar and send a reminder. If it's a meeting notice, you could send an email and put it up in the notice board. Meeting minutes as well. They could be posted online, but also emailed or saved in the manager's office so people could find a copy like that. Having those options means that you don't have to do everything. It means that you can pick and choose and see with your community what works best for them so that you can reach the most amount of people so that no one complains. Well, not no one, less people find reason to complain that they don't know what's going on because you are trying to reach them. You are finding them rather than them having to work out where it is that they find their information and having to come and find you. You just go straight to them.